The MLB is horrified of this, and following what has been a start for the Jays that has exceeded many fans' expectations, some interesting reports, comments from the players have started to come out revealing that not only are the Jays off to a hot start by a matter of chance and luck, this team is built different from the top to bottom, and some comments and reports that have come out highlight that this is a lot better than a lot of Jays fans thought. We're going to break that down and discuss what this means going forward, as well as break down some other updates ahead of tonight's series opener against the Seattle Mariners. So stay tuned for all that in this episode, folks. But before we get into it, if you're a part of the 71% who aren't subscribed to the channel, this is the place to be for daily Jays content. Your guys' support's been unbelievable. If you want to help us towards the big goal of 20,000 subscribers, that is, of course, the major goal, make sure to hit the subscribe button. Ladies and gentlemen, let's not waste any more time. A lot to go over today. Now, obviously, the Jays had an off day yesterday, and the Yankees won. The AL East was still playing, but the Jays had their off day, and the Jays are in a very good spot. They currently sit second behind the Yankees in the AL East, but the MLB is starting to take notice of the Toronto Blue Jays, and it started, just a week ago in the power rankings, all these different things. But one comment by Chris Bassitt, I'm just going to dive into it right now, has really highlighted how things have changed for this team. Chris Bassitt says that it feels like everyone is finally on the same page, top to bottom in the organization. I give all the credit to the front office, not just the team they built, but the changes we made in the offseason and how open they were to talking and listening to us. And ladies and gentlemen, this is, of course, following their big win a couple nights ago. This team, and again, it's very early, but this team feels different. They've been, they're one of the best teams in the MLB. They're, of course, one of the best teams in the American League and the American League East. But the bigger story here is not, of course, necessarily how they're winning, because they still haven't even touched the surface of what this team can touch. We saw Vladdy's first home run last game. We saw Anthony Santander start, he has 6 or 7 games in a row with an extra base hit. His WRC plus in the last handful of games is 155. Like, he is starting to pick it up. But this team, despite Anthony Santander's slow start, despite Vladdy's slow start as it pertains to power, has not even scratched the surface, but they're still playing together and they are finding a way to win. And that is not something we've seen over the past few years. And Chris Bassitt has been here over the past few years, past couple of years. And of course, some of the other guys, Kevin Gausman, Vladdy's been around, all these different guys, they've seen some of the struggles, if not all the struggles that the Jays have, of course, gone through with the the AL wild card, all these different things. But for Bassitt to come out and say that it feels different, it is very telling and something that really needs to be spoken about more, because if the Jays can lock in here and start to actually hit for power and really fulfill the potential that we know they can and that we've really been hoping for the past half decade with this core, things are going to be very scary for the MLB. And it starts from top to bottom. I mean, you look at the starting pitching staff, you look at the bullpen, of course, we know how good that bullpen has been to start the year. It's been elite. Starting rotation's been elite. And of course, Chris Bassitt's been the best pitcher in baseball. Now, there's some other comments from Chris Bassitt I want to dive into here and some reports, some articles. Let's start with this. The back end of our bullpen, I'll take against anybody, Bassitt said. No offense to anybody, but since my Oakland days with Blake Trinan and Lou Trevino doing their thing, it's pretty easy for us starters to say it's a race to 5 innings, maybe 6. Then it's going to be really hard for us to lose a game. It all came down to the final at bat. Of course, we're talking about Hoffman versus Eli White in the last game. This is an extremely true point. Obviously, over the past few years, the bullpen has been very up and down. There's been some years where it's been great. 2023, the Eric Swanson year where he really helped carry this team along with Jordan Romano to the playoffs. And then there's been years where it's been really bad. One of the biggest issues in 2021 when they missed the playoffs in one game, we had Rafael Dolis. We had a bunch of guys that were really bad, right? And it is a very interesting thing now to see how, it's a very interesting storyline to see how much this team has evolved, but also how scary the Jays are now. The starting pitching staff, as we spoke about from the start of the season, it is not necessarily elite in the sense of having elite talent at the top. But what you do have is a bunch of steady guys who are going to give you 5 or 6 innings every single night. And then if you pair that with an elite bullpen, that's a recipe for an elite pitching staff from top to bottom. And that's something that not many teams across the MLB have. And this is without Eric Swanson. This is with Max Scherzer injured. This is without, on the offensive side, Dalton Varsho. It is a scary team, and of course, we all know the Jays have been very disappointing. Everyone hates Ross Atkins to a degree. I think he still did a fine job, especially now that the Vladdy extension went through. But regardless of that and your stance on that, this team, it's time to give them a little bit of credit here. I'm going to be giving them credit. You guys don't have to, but I'm going to give them some credit. The team looks very scary this year, and to hear these comments, the MLB should be terrified of the Toronto Blue Jays, and it's really starting to show in everywhere you look. Now, as it pertains to the AL East, they are in the second spot. They currently sit in a wild card spot. Of course, the Tigers are 11-8. The Jays are 11-8. The Yankees are 12-7. They've been off to a bit of a hot start, but their schedule is much, much easier than the Toronto Blue Jays' schedule. And again, they won back-to-back games against a very solid Braves team, albeit very bad this year, missing a couple of key players. And they start tonight against the Mariners before they head back on the road against the Astros. This month, as I've mentioned a million times on the channel, is absolutely not only brutal, it is completely, it's the worst month for the Blue Jays as it pertains to strength of schedule in the entire year, paired with the end of the season in September. Start of the season, end of the season, April and September are the two worst months for them. And they are sitting second in the AL East and in a wild card spot. Let's dive into some of the more comments. We're just reaping the seeds, so to speak, that we sowed in the offseason from getting together with the front office and changing things up analytically that we want to change. I honestly give all the credit to the front office for not just the team they built, but the changes that we made in the offseason and how they were open to talking and listening to us. For the first time since I've been here, I would say that everyone feels really comfortable with how everything is working. And that is a huge statement, and they keep referring to these changes. I'm not exactly sure, and there's been some, rumblings online and on Twitter about who they're talking about, who was, maybe the guy who shouldn't be in the on the team and hasn't, whether it's players or coaching staff. I'm leaning more towards coaching staff. Guillermo Martinez, Matt Haig, they obviously left. Matt Haig did a good job, but Guillermo Martinez, maybe they're talking about him, throwing some shots at him. I don't think Bassitt's necessarily throwing shots at anybody. Maybe Don Mattingly being moved off of course, the hitting coach position, because he came out, and I don't even want to begin to think about what would happen if we didn't have Don Mattingly on the hitting side and ahead of that, because the Jays clearly changed their approach. Danny Jansen was the only one who didn't, and he was pulling a bunch of balls. But nonetheless, you look at some of the bullpen too. Their current bullpen AL rankings, they're some of the best in the MLB. Third in batting average, second in WHIP, third in Ks, sixth in ERA. You look at Jimmy Garcia, off to an insane start, a fantastic signing, the first signing of the offseason. I was live for that signing. 2 years, $15 million. Absolute robbery. It is a robbery of a contract. Everything is going well for this team. Now, that doesn't mean that, of course, it can't change. And you can see here, again, total strikeouts. I mean, Chris Bassitt in the last game against the Braves put up 10 strikeouts, an unheard of number for Chris Bassitt, especially now that he's in his late 30s. But as you start to look at this team, you do not have Dalton Varsho. Max Scherzer is still working through things. Alek Manoah, who maybe, will replace Easton Lucas, depending on Max Scherzer's health. Again, Dalton Varsho is the big one, obviously. But even just guys like that, and of course, all these different players, Eric Swanson has been a big part. The bullpen is some of the best in the MLB without one of your best relievers. You have Hoffman, Jimmy Garcia. They are nails down in the pen. Nick Sandlin's been fantastic. Add that to the absolute fleece of a trade that Ross Atkins pulled off with the Guardians, his former team. It is fantastic. And I think it's at the point now where I wanted to give some credit to the team ahead of a big series. Things can change on a dime in baseball, but the way this team is playing together, paired with the comments from Chris Bassitt, paired with everyone saying that inside the clubhouse that things feel different. We think back to the start of the season. Before the season started on the X-Rating show by the Jays, behind the scenes, John Schneider was saying, this is the best I've ever felt about a team. They're going to say that every year, but he really felt it this year, and it feels different so far, and hopefully the Jays can keep it up and continue to put them in a playoff spot. 7-3 at home, 4-5 on the road. Hopefully they continue that tonight against the Mariners. Cheers.